So what I'm going to talk about today is some work we've been doing, as Thomas has said, with Operation Nightingale, which is an initiative, I guess if I go the right way, to assist the recovery of wounded, injured and sick military personnel and veterans by getting them involved in archaeological investigations. And it's actually an initiative that's really run by Richard Osgood, who should be talking about this rather than me. Richard is the powerhouse behind Operation Nightingale, and he is the MOD's archaeologist, and the whole initiative is funded by the MOD. And it's not surprising when you think about the huge estates that the Ministry of Defence own and the number of heritage monuments that exist within their estates, 770 scheduled monuments at least within their portfolio. But including, you know, that's just monuments, that doesn't take into account the landscapes that contain enormous amounts of history and archaeology. And so the Operation Nightingale has been running since 2011 and now has undertaken many excavations across the UK and overseas. But this is the first time that they've done anything, Richard's organised anything in the southwest. And he came to us early this year, or rather the Defensive Infrastructure Organisation, DIO, did, and asked us to tender to work with Richard on some project at Buckspool Camp in Pembrokeshire, which is on the Castlemartin firing range. And it was, we won the tender to work with him. You wouldn't believe it, this is competitive archaeology, so we were actually tendering against companies like Wessex Archaeology. But thankfully we won the tender, and we excavated for 2 weeks this August in incredibly hot weather, which was lovely, but a bit exposed we are there. Anyway, carry on. So this is just a distribution map of all the hill forts and other Iron Age settlements in Wales. It's a bit older now, Ken, I think. It's getting a little bit out of date. We've used it for many, many years. But Buckspool Camp Promontory Fort is down there on the southwest. And another map to show you. And the red line shows that it's a scheduled monument, so obviously agreement had to be sought from CADU to do the work, and a project design raised to, which Richard wrote to explain what the aims of the project were. As we've said, it's on the Castlemartin firing range, and you have to remember that the only month we could work was August, when the range shuts down for the 4 weeks. So you're very, thankfully it isn't in an area of where the tanks fire. We're actually in the small arms area, but even so, we don't want to be there when the tanks are firing. Anyway, so Buckspool Promontory Fort, also known as the Castle, is an Iron Age promontory fort situated on the south coast of Pembrokeshire. You can see how the obvious threat from coastal erosion that exists to this site, as it does to many promontory forts along the coast of Pembrokeshire and elsewhere. And this is a photograph taken by the Royal Commission, an aerial photograph in 2024 under drought conditions. And you can clearly see the defensive banks and ditches, the 3 banks and ditches that defend that promontory, and the number of what has been called, titled or labelled hut circles. You see the little dark impressions, the circular darker areas marking hollows which, where the vegetation is slightly moister because of the depth and the surrounding area. And so it shows as a dark circular mark on this aerial photograph. And these have been suggested that they are numerous hut circles on this promontory. There have been finds from this site. Allegedly they are in the National Museum, but they are mostly of Roman pottery of 2nd, 3rd, 4th a little bit of 4th century pottery, but that is as much as we know about any previous work carried out at the site. Now, it's Richard's suggestion that Cadw agreed with that we should investigate 2 of these hut circles, alleged hut circles, on the site in this year, because the project, we hope, it should be, we'll continue the work next year. Now, we tend to bandy around, as archaeologists, these terminology, these labels like hut circle, hut platform, roundhouse, and we're not always clear what we mean by these. So I just thought, rather than just a quick run through a few sites that we've excavated recently to show that these terms can mean a multitude of things. So this is Pendinas Hill Fort, another Iron Age hill fort, massive structure outside Aberystwyth. You can see the hill fort with its huge defensive banks and its annex fort, that smaller circular structure, enclosure rather. And you can see also that we, Ken and I, over some years, funded through Cadw and the HLF, did some work on excavating at Pendinas, and this shows one of the hut platforms. There are many platforms created by excavating into the hillside, creating a flat terrace on which you can, we thought, for constructing homes, if you like, houses, round houses, if possibly. And that picture on the left is one excavated by Ken. And you can see that there are wall gullies and post holes arrangements, and that's basically the evidence for that some form of building that we have from a site like Pendinas. It's worth saying there is no Roman activity at this site. Again, this is Caer Cadogan Hill Fort in Ceredigion, and this shows again a rock cut platform with, you can see the circular wall line, still with some packing stones in it. And again, this site not occupied during the Roman period. Just quickly moving on back down to Pembrokeshire at Carvai Promontory Fort. Again, you see those wonderful, massive defensive banks and ditches. And here are they excavated, Dig Ventures excavated as part of the Cherish project, a couple of stone structures, one of which was thought possibly to be domestic. But again, so we have this slight development from the structures we saw at Caer Cadogan and Pendinas. And then if we move on, back, and we go to Dinas Dinthla, we see something very different. Now again, we've moved from sort of hut platform, hut structure, round building, to now what we quite legitimately call a round house. And this was excavated by Gwynedd, the Gwynedd region of Heneb, over 3 seasons, and funded by Cadw. And now you can see it's a prime, you couldn't get a better example of coastal erosion than Dinas Dinthla, with it's built on windblown sand, and the sea is just eroding the whole site away very quickly. And this round house was fantastic, probably 2nd to 3rd century round house of not enormous diameter. Internally it's about 8.6 meters, but the walls are about 2.7 meters thick, massive thing, lovely entranceway. Not a huge amount in the way of finds, I think 468 pieces of pot, 200 of which came from one smashed vessel, and six coins, 5 you couldn't identify, and one of them was from the usurper Electus, who was about the end of the 3rd century. So not, an amazing, it's a beautiful site and well worth visiting. But, and that, you can obviously see this change from what we previously saw in the Iron Age through to this site, which is clearly a Romano-British 2nd to 3rd century. If we move on to Porthoral Promontory Fort, which is, I'm biased, I think it's a wonderful site because I supervised it. You can again see amazing, massive defensive banks and ditches, protecting what was a promontory that has been nearly completely destroyed by coastal erosion. But over 3 seasons, we excavated quite a large area of that surviving promontory. And you can see the roundhouse there. Again, very similar in many ways to Dinas Dinthla. This one has been somewhat terraced into the slope. So what survives is this wall of only about 1.5 meters wide walls surrounding a very similar sized internal diameter to Dinas Dinthla, about 9 meters. Lovely entranceway. And again, but materially, over 3 seasons, I think we had about 102 pieces of pottery. Some other finds, but not many. Some evidence of metalworking, as have done at many other sites. But again, quite poor materially for what is a well-occupied site. I have to say that actually Pete Grain excavated here in the 1990s as well, along the sort of western strip edge of the promontory. But putting all Pete's work and our work together, you can see that big roundhouse replaces all that evidence you see around of those little gullies, those curving gullies, are actually indications of former wall lines of Iron Age wooden houses. But this 2nd to 3rd century massive roundhouse, you can see, well, it's not massive, but when you look at it in comparison to everything else, it sits there, plonks itself down, actually post-dates and replaces an earlier roundhouse that ran under the banks, which were remodeled in this same period. So, but what I wanted to show you was just how different this structure is from what we consider Iron Age roundhouses. It is worth saying, because I love Porthoral, that we always presumed that this was a site for metalworking because we had so many hearths. The little red patches that you can see are where we had hearths around the house. Around the house, I call it a roundhouse. I should call it, as Ken says, a round building, because it's not a house. We thought that it was actually a metalworking, if you like, a small not factory, but light industry, if you like. But when we had the analysis carried out of all what we considered to be material from the metalworking, from the hearths and slags, turned out to be there was no metalworking at all. And what the only suggestion we can come up with is that it might be a temple of some description. The analysis of the charcoal was really interesting because what it showed was that the charcoal had been created from coppiced wood, and the charcoal was probably produced to burn at really high temperatures cleanly. So what was going on, I have absolutely no idea, but temple sounds a good idea. So on to Buckspool. Again, one of these coastal eroded promontories, which has been defended by these banks and ditches. You can see, if I get the right button, which is the right button? Ooh, that's a blowhole. One of the things I didn't really take into account when we started this work was this is limestone, and it's a limestone outcrop, and we're used to digging on rab, interbedded mudstones, sandstones and siltstones, which are very acidic. And I didn't think that being on limestone, just didn't occur to me that limestone might make a difference, but that will come to that in a bit. So this is in the middle of our excavations when we were opening up both what we called hut circles or hut sites. And this is, you can see at the bottom is structure 1. And you can see we've just started on structure 2 to the top. They're quite small. Internally, structure 1's a little bit bigger. It's about 6 meters in diameter, and structure 2 is about 5.5. And they're the excavation showed that they're quite simple. Archaeologically speaking, there's very little in the way of stratigraphy. So this is just a close-up of that aerial that was taken by Toby Driver of the Royal Commission. And you can see the volunteers excavating in the middle. And you can see a line of stone, a little wall. And it is a little wall. It's just one course of stone that's sort of defining the edge of this feature. But you can also see how this is bedrock outcropping. This is all bedrock, limestone bedrock outcropping. And it's, if I go to the next, it doesn't exactly jump out as somewhere hospitable to live. I suspect that it may be a natural feature that's been slightly enhanced over the years. But I'll keep going because it might make sense what I'm saying. But that definitely, you can see this little wall surviving. It doesn't really amount to a great deal. It's not bonded together in any way or that survives. And it's just basically one course high and doesn't survive around the whole perimeter of the roundhouse. Roundhouse, I've got to stop using that word. Structure, whatever we would like to call it. This is another view looking northeast and this is really where we came to the end of the excavation. So this hollow, if you like, was filled with a homogeneous, silty soil that didn't vary at all from top to bottom. So basically, take off the turf, you have a little bit of topsoil, a bit of inert material, and then you're into this deposit, which remains the same all the way to the end of the 2 weeks that we could dig. We didn't actually hit the very bottom in the 2 weeks, but we were approaching it. But it remained completely the same. This is structure 2 in the foreground. This is a slightly more convincing as, if you like, some form of useful structure or possible somewhere to, I don't know. But it's not convincing, really. This one, though, we did think that we might be near a floor. Again, it was filled with the same homogeneous soil that had no stratigraphic differences in as we went down. It was just very much the same all the way through. But we did feel towards the end of the 2 weeks that archaeologically, I think I feel it coming through my fingers as I trowel, that there was a possible surface or floor underneath, but we didn't get there. So over the 2 weeks that we had with our veteran volunteers, as Thomas said, from across the whole of the UK and Dimitrov and the Ukrainian army, we had, it was very simple. It was this one deposit, remove it and see what it exposed. It sounds although it was very simple, it was really hard troweling that bedrock. And it took ages getting the vegetation off. But what makes this whole site stand out, and this is what I was saying about the limestone, when I came to when we started site, I took out 3 finds trays, because if a lot of the volunteers who I know who are here today and have worked with us over the years know that we don't find very much. And we're really pleased if we find a piece of pot. And it is that bad. And people from the southeast of England just don't know how lucky they are. And when they do come and work here, they think, whoa, my goodness, how can you get so worked up on a piece of pot? And if you worked here for a few years, you would. Or even a little bit of flint. So my expectation was few finds. And to be honest, I hadn't built much in the way of finds work into my costings for Richard, which was a big mistake, because we had masses of finds. And this is just a small portion of what we've started bagging up, including enormous amounts of animal bone. It didn't occur to me that on limestone soils being so alkaline, they would preserve bone so well. We just hardly ever work on them. But bags and bags of bone. So when I said that, say, for those 3 seasons of work at Dinas Dintler, we had 468 sherds, at Portharau, 102. So far, in this very small area, we had over 1,000. 1,000 sherds of pottery of numerous types. So, and masses of animal bone. I think it, as far as I'm aware, in all the years I've worked at Heneb, this is the biggest assemblage of animal bone from a Roman site, because this is Roman material. This is Roman pot. These are Roman finds. These are probably, I'll talk a bit later, but these are 2nd, 3rd, 4th century finds we're getting. And it's all packed in these 2 little depressions in the ground that we were excavating. And remember, when you think of the 2 sites that we had, Dinas Dintler and Portharau, with their big stone-walled 2nd, 3rd century roundhouses, this is not what we're excavating here. These are small hollows which have been labelled hut circles by archaeologists, including myself in the past, or hut, what am I saying? Yes. Sorry? No, not roundhouse. No, sorry. I've lost my train of thought. Anyway, so these are quite, simple structures with this homogeneous material, which is absolutely jam-packed with finds. So we had some lovely pottery of enormous range of types as well, including some very fine wares, some lovely Samian, some wares we haven't yet identified, and some loads of coarse wares and lots of mortarium, and including maker's marks. Other finds included, wrong way, glass beads. We had little glass beads, fragments of glass, and one of the other advantage of being on a limestone site, beautiful preservation of environmental, of like carbonized seed. And that was one of the other things. In structure 1, that sort of more hewn out of the bedrocks depression, if you like, there were actually, within that homogeneous material were specific deposits of shells and burnt grain. And I say specific, and they could not have been any more. The limpets shells had been placed, they obviously collected many of them together, and they'd started with the bigger ones and then worked their way up into the tiny ones and then set them on the side and placed them in the ground. Now this is really odd. And next to it was an area which had sort of, we weren't sure whether it had been cut out of the bedrock on person for a reason, or it just was utilising something naturally occurring, but inside they'd packed that with carbonized grain. So it's really peculiar. There's this place, there were something like, I think we counted them yesterday, 42 pieces of copper items, lots of iron nails, lots of iron objects, hobnails from boots, several glass beads, and other objects, some high status objects, like this This is a jet hairpin, a long hairpin that's been broken. And this is the carved top of it. And this is from Whitby. This is jet from Whitby. It's a lovely thing and quite rare. There are a few others, and Tony Wilmot found one exactly the same time at Bird Oswald where he was digging, which is quite funny. And he's quick to tell Richard about it. And spoons. We think they're little measuring spoons. But these are iron. Sorry, I'm going to have to drink. So, I can't stress enough how extraordinary this is compared to what we normally find on sites of this same age. And it really is, we don't, so I'll carry on because I'm getting caught up in my own thoughts. So the time that it took was more spent looking for finds than it was for digging the soil out. We also had, and this is really striking, 168 coins. And Peter Guest, who is very kindly assessing them at the moment, has had some initial thoughts. And what we have is coins. So far, this is just a temporary, it's some information from him, from Carausius, who was fashioned his name, Emperor of the North for himself, before being assassinated by his finance minister Electus, who only lasted 3 years. I love these stories. Anyway, 286 to 293, Marcus Carausius. We have Constantine the Great, 306 to 337, and that picture is actually one from our site. The others aren't, I'm afraid, they're just examples. But that was a lovely coin, found by one of the volunteers. But then we have really late coins. The last emperors, really, some of the last emperors, and the last to reign over the entire Roman Empire before its administration split between West and East. So we have Valentinian I, and now we're getting, 364 to 375, and as I say, Theodosius I, the last emperor to rule the entire empire, 379 to 395. It's extraordinary that we are finding coins of this date at this site. It's incredibly rare. And in speaking to Peter, the only other known coins currently at this far southwest, there's one from Tenby, and the rest are from much further east, like Caerwent or Cardiff. And it's often been thought, as Peter has said, that the absence indicates of late 4th century Roman coins, the absence in southwest Wales indicates the withdrawal of Roman troops or authority. But he said, well, sorry, Fran, we're going to have to rethink again if you're finding loads of them. So we have a long way to go. And one thing we have to work out is what's going on. I mean, why is there this accumulation of this late 3rd and 4th century material in these two hollows, which we thought were possibly, structures to live in? And are we looking at something, is it a midden? Is it a rubbish dump? And why are people dumping their rubbish here? Where are they living if they've got all this rubbish to dump? Or does it have some other significance? Is that structure one, that sort of more hollowed out of the bedrock type, would we find that if we excavated more of it, that it just was a natural hollow and it just went down and down and down in the limestone? And if we kept going down, we'd go through the periods of down to Bronze Age, Neolithic. Perhaps people have been coming here all the year. Is it like a wishing well? Are people depositing things because they feel it has some useful purpose, some significance, that if they deposit something broken, because all these pieces, there's nothing whole going in here. Everything is broken. All the metal objects have been broken. The hairpin is broken. what's with all these little deposits of shells and carbonized grain? Is it a votive, an offering to the gods or an offering to the spirit of this place? Are these none of these little hollows that we see on this aerial photographs, which we've all neatly called huts, are actually nothing to do with living here at all, and the whole site has a completely different purpose. I really, like every person, every archaeologist who stands up here, there's more questions than answers, and it's so unlike what we expected to find, that we're really out on a limb here because there's nothing much else to compare it to. So the plan is next year to return. I would very much like to finish these two structures off and excavate them in total, and see whether below this remnant of this soil that we want to remove, there are post holes or wall gullies that would indicate what the original purpose of these is. I think Richard would like to move on to, there is a very, very odd rectangular tower structure sitting in the defences that he wants to look at, and we both want to look at the defensive ditches. So hopefully between us we can find a compromise here. But it was a fantastic project to work on a beautiful site, and I have to, all credit to Richard Osgood for persuading the authorities to fund these things, because it takes many, many years in the planning. But what it's shown us is that every time we excavate one of these, what we neatly label Iron Age promontory forts, they're all different. There's no consistency in them at all, and they show the vibrant range of life that's going on over a long period of time, many, many centuries, right into the end of the late 4th century. It's, I have to say, at that point, it stops, as it does in most hill forts. Nothing further, no further late post-Roman activity occurs. So all I can say is, I'm sorry that's a bit brief and a bit of run through. We really are at the first stages. You always hope that when you come off site, you're immediately going to do all the post-excavation work, but of course we move on to another piece of work and it all gets pushed along. And we still have a lot of work to do, but that actually, the majority of it will happen next year after we complete the field work next year. It's too quick for me. But just to say, it was a real privilege to work with Richard and the veterans. I mean, they aren't all retired military personnel. Some of them are still acting. And we had a tank commander from one regiment who often comes to trains at Castlemartin. And he came and worked on the dig. And he said, it was lovely to come to Castlemartin because we stayed on the base and not be... and be able to cross the green between the paths. He said when he's there training, they're only allowed to walk along the paths. And he said, I now can wear a pair of flip-flops. And I don't get shouted at by the people in the canteen. They're all really nice when you're not when you're not here training. But it was a fantastic 2 weeks. And Richard had so many people who wanted to come that we had to have 16 people the first week and 16 people the second week. So by the end of the first week, I'd just got to know the names of everyone, and then they were replaced. I don't think anyone will forget Dimitro, who you see there wielding on the top right-hand side in the foreground. He is now fighting in Ukraine. He is a tank commander. And he was also a chaplain. And when we went... to St. Govan's Chapel, he stopped everybody by standing up in Ukrainian chant, singing the Our Father in Ukrainian, which it was really beautiful, and it's sobering to know that after working for a week with us, he went straight back onto the to fight, which is bonkers. So it was a fantastic time, and all credit to Richard Osgood for everything that he does and being such a whiz on social media, if you follow him, and for the Ministry of Defence, the Defensive Infrastructure Organisation, also for Thomas for all his help, and for Lynn, the Castlemartin warden, and for, I have to thank Toby Driver from the Royal Commission, and Louise Barker, who also came and worked on site and did the aerial photography and did the survey. And for Ken, Andrew and Jess, who worked on the site with me from Heneb. We've got so much more to do. It's just stonking that every time you open the ground and look at something, it just makes you realise just how complicated and how life was, and how sometimes we simplify things because we just don't know any different. One other thing is we couldn't wash any of the finds on site, so we brought them all back. And the Swansea, the veterans hub, the Swansea vets came. Some of them worked on the site, actually. They all came, and they were amazingly good at washing finds. So that's it, really. I can't think of anything more to say, other than next year in August, because the footpath's accessible, do come and see us. Thank you.